Yeah, so, yeah. Okay. No. Okay. Keep the expectations low. Yeah, I will. Yeah, I'll let people know. Yeah. There's one slide that might be a little tricky. Yeah. So just check. I have to check on your one slide. Because it's sourced.
Yeah, but I couldn't respond to anything about it.
You ready to roll? Okay, good. And I'll end up redoing it because people come late, but it's all good.
All right, welcome guys. Don't worry, you're not hearing from me. We are going to be doing restorative practices, which is awesome. And today we have Ken Trautwein.
Wine.
Trautwein.
Not drink. Yep.
Yes. He has 25 years experience teaching middle school and high school science. And he is also starting a program called Current Education Center, which is a really cool program. And you're about to talk to him about it. But he's like just starting that as of a couple months ago, and he's already got like classes. I'm so impressed with how it's coming along. He is also a restorative practices trainer and implementation coach for the International Institutes for Restorative Practices graduate school. That's a mouthful, but he knows his stuff. And he's been doing this for a while, and he's actually gone around and trained people in this, like, professionally. So, you're a professional, which is always a treat. So,
Here we go. Oh, great, thank you. There's a lot here. So I do train restorative practices professionally here and there now because I'm starting a center. I don't do it as much. I was actually in Cincinnati last Monday and Tuesday training their schools. Yeah, the schools. So the training that I normally do is between 10 and 12 hours of training at one time. And I'm gonna try to get it to 45 minutes, which is like near impossible. So my RP buddy, who still teaches in Pepper Horsham, she and I kind of went through and we talked about like what do families really need? Because most of the work that happens for restorative practices in schools, like what's practical for families? So I'm gonna kind of aim for that, but it's really, this is like people work, so I'll get there. So a way of being that promotes community and helps manage conflict and tensions by repairing harm and restoring relationships. And it really starts with that sort of community building. So if you're in a community setting, then that could be the community. And before we go any further, sorry, let's do a couple check-ins. I want to do a fist to 5, so a fist is 0, a 5 is like 4. So how long have you been homeschooling from fist to 5? So 0 years up to 5 or more. All right, some zeros, 1, 0, 2. Just look around too at like who's in the room, okay? All right, so a couple 5s, a couple 0s and 1s. All right, how about your kids? How many kids do you have from 0 to 5 plus? So let's look around. What do we have? 2s, several, right? All right, 1s, 2s, and 5s. Okay, so just trying to get a range of like who's here. And then the last question is about restorative practices. I'm actually going to use a dial because we can go more incremental. Your knowledge of restorative practices from, I've like heard the 2 words together and that's all I know. And Ken, if you go down, I got you. Right, okay, most of you thumbs down, and a little bit of knowledge. And say your first name again for us. Larcina. So Larcina actually worked at a program, an alternative school that I'm going to talk about. We didn't know each other before this, but they implemented restorative practices. That's how restorative practices started, was from that program. So I'll give that little bit of timeline, and then we're going to just keep moving because there's so much more than just that, but it has a piece in it. I'm going to put up a slide that has like some details about me, but so in 1993 I graduated from Penn State with a degree in meteorology, quickly got a full-time job as a bartender, and then moved to Boston about a year later to be a weather forecaster. And then after that I decided I don't want to do that, I want to be a teacher. So I applied to Harvard's Graduate School of Education to become a teacher, and they said no. And then I asked my ex-girlfriend to move up to Boston with me and live there forever, and she also said no. So a little bit of time, I moved back down to this area. I moved with a family friend in Morrisville, and then started taking classes at Rider. Got my teacher certification. My very first year teaching, I was over at a rural public school in New Jersey. And I moved over the river and started teaching at Haver Horsham, where this fine family is from, which again, I didn't know that, but they're like, you're Mr. Trautwein. Now just can. So yeah, they were 15 years old when I was, my kids were probably, like early schooling ages when they were there. So I spent 14 years teaching high school science, and then another 9 years teaching middle school science. I'm gonna give you some more like the fancy details. So married 25 years, Janine is the ex-girlfriend who wouldn't move up to Boston with me, but we've been married for 25 years. She got to be a big Caitlin Clark fan, and I had a bunch of airline miles, so we went to Indianapolis and saw the last Fever game last year, where they won by like a single point, like 110 to 109 or something crazy. So I have 2 kids. Luke is 22, he's graduating college. Abby's 20, she is in college. We have 2 cats live in Bluebell, and I like to do stuff outside, yoga, walking in the woods. That's pretty much me.
What about the beach?
No, I'd rather be under tree. I'd rather be under canopy. Like actually when I go under canopy, my blood pressure drops. I can actually feel it. When I'm exposed, like outside, like in a field or on a beach, not so much. So for me, it's the canopy. I was on the coast of Oregon in October, and they have like forest right next to the beach, which was also, that was the best part. Right? So my current education center, I'm the founder and mentor there. Again, another connection. I'm going to connect with everybody here except for you. I'm not sure why yet, but we'll figure that out. Kim has graciously tried our center with her son, and it seems to be working out really well for him. So again, it's moving along. We are implementing restorative practices, but we're not explicit about it. And this morning I realized I need to be more explicit about it. So you're gonna start hearing James talk more language, right? So I've been a coach and trainer with the IRP since 2022, when I was still teaching. And then in 2023, I started doing that full time. Did it for a year full time, and then started building the self-directed education center. Again, weather forecaster, Penn State, Council Rock, hated school, swore I'd never go back. When I left Council Rock in 1989, we had like 3,000 kids there. It was a mess, and I hated it. It took me 10 years to go back to school. So my restorative practices history, like the kind of lineage that got me to here today. So I put up there International Institute for Restorative Practices in 1999. They're up in Bethlehem. They're a graduate school, but they do training. I put that up there because that's when they were founded. They were founded by this guy named Ted Wachtel. He was a social studies teacher, I believe, in Quakertown schools. Felt like what he was doing was not good for kids. Quit, loaded up the family, put him in I think it was like a VW bus. They went to Cali, spent a couple years there, came back, and he started BuxMont Academy, which is where he works, right? One of their centers. And he was doing this thing that didn't really have a name yet. And he kept doing stuff and he kept learning more. And eventually what he learned was what he was doing, people called restorative practices. And he was working with these kids who had been kicked out of school, adjudicated youth, and he is still involved in restorative practices, but kind of has even moved away from it a little bit. I was originally introduced in the early 2000s as a teacher. They came in, trained a bunch of people to train, and then they left. And I was only there on the edge of it. I wasn't super involved. But when, in 2018, when I wanted to start building intentional classroom community, I was like, oh yeah, they're right up there in Bethlehem. So I started taking their trainings, then I started taking their graduate classes, got my graduate certificate in restorative practices, and then when they were looking for trainers, they're like, do you want to train? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I've been doing that off and on. I've been to California, Oregon, all over Ohio, blah, 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 right? But this is normally a training that's 10 to 12 hours, so let's get into the meat. So we're gonna start with what used to be known as the fundamental hypothesis. It's changed a little bit, but I do want somebody to read this out loud for everybody. Go ahead, Kim.
Okay, we believe humans are happier, healthier, more productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior and communities when we do things with them rather than to them, for them, or not at all.
Okay. This, I think, is picture worthy. If you want something, feel free to take pictures. This is pretty much the whole thing. And we're gonna kind of talk through what this can look like, what it might look like, how there's a lot in this. So you can see Ted Wachtel's name on the far right. It has been updated. You can see Beth's last name. Mary Jo Hebling, did you know her too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she's up there, yeah. So Gina Abrams, you didn't know, she's newer. But these are all folks from the IRP. So we're gonna break down like what those things mean with, to, for, not with. What does that mean to work with people? But what I want to do, and since we're a small group, I think we'll actually do this. I want you to think of somebody that was like super influential to you throughout your life, either as a kid, maybe a teen, young adult, maybe a teacher, a coach, religious, somebody from religious organization, parent, grandparent, whatever it is, somebody who is very influential in your life. And I want you to think of just one word that describes what made them kind of special or what made them so influential to you. Now, we're gonna go around, I'm gonna ask you to say the one word. You can always pass. So if it gets to you and you're like, please say pass, or just shake your head, all right? The person next to you will know. We're gonna go around the inside circle and then we're gonna come back around to the outside, all right? So I'm gonna get started, I'm gonna go to my left. So my one word is consistency.
So was my grandmother
Just one word.
traditionalism?
Great.
Forgiving.
Support.
Jeez. I would say. Can I go back through?
Yeah, yeah, great.
Can I say hardworking?
Sure, yeah. Hyphenated?
2 words.
Yeah, hyphenated.
Generous.
Generous.
Focus.
Okay.
Encouraging.
Understanding.
Grit.
Participating.
Safe.
Patient. Accountability.
Perception.
Loud.
Loud, okay. All right, so we're gonna take these ideas and we're gonna kind of start to formalize like a concept here. And we're gonna look at these, and I heard more of the words that sort of go across this bottom of support, this encouragement, this idea of love. And so I put love in there with encouragement, but this idea of support, and then somebody even used the word accountability, right? So we're gonna kind of look at this cross section or where these meet. But let's talk about that upper left quadrant, okay? Somebody's super high on accountability, super low on support. And if you already know all the answers, just hold them, right? But, so what kinds of words would you use to describe somebody in that upper left quadrant, super high on accountability, super low on support? Just throw some words out. Demanding is probably a good one. Picky, is that what you said? Yeah, like just on the little
Or
stuff.
just pick, or just complain about the small little things.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Determined.
Okay, determined. That's nice.
Detail oriented.
Okay, maybe detail oriented, but remember, low support, low encouragement.
High expectations.
Right, high expectations, but what else? Yeah, Ken.
Low self-esteem.
Maybe low self-esteem. I'm not gonna define that, but it could be that they're there because of that. Could be. Right? A-hole? I'm not sure if that's language that you use, but. Yeah, maybe narcissistic, potentially narcissistic, and I say potentially because there's so many personalities that can fit in all these, but there's things that you're thinking of that help get you to that idea. Tough, right? Cold, right, like, cause there's the demands, but not the heart behind it, right? So let's go to the bottom right. Okay, this is the person that's super high on support, super high on care, but super low on accountability. What kinds of ways would you describe that person? What kind of words would you use? Enabler. Keep throwing them out. Just say words. They don't have to be right.
Inconsistent.
Inconsistent, potentially, yeah. Right. Fluffy. Soft. Doormat. Maybe vulnerable.
Unreliable.
Maybe unreliable. Right, again, that low accountability is, right, and if you're talking about low accountability for self, generally somebody, actually that doesn't always equate. Some people have high accountability for others and low accountability for self, and some people have high accountability for self and high accountability for others. Depends on which way they go, right? How about the bottom left? Low support and low accountability. Bum? Yeah, for sure, yep.
Lazy.
Maybe lazy, yep. Maybe also burnout.
I was gonna say overwhelmed.
Maybe overwhelmed, right? We'll talk about overwhelmed. Absent? Right? And then I'm assuming the blue one is probably the person you were thinking of that has high accountability and high support. What kind of words would you use to describe that kind of person?
Self-determined.
Maybe self-determined? Motivated? Consistent? Understanding? Yeah. People like a coach, like
Accomplisher, like
get stuff done. Yeah. Anybody watch Ted Lasso at all?
Yes.
Yeah, so like Ted Lasso often fits in that, right? High relational, but also high accountability. Okay. I'm gonna throw some words. I'm gonna actually put a slide up. This next one is the better one to get a picture of. Some words that we use in these 4 boxes. And you're gonna see the words to, for, with, and not there, right? That matches that with concepts. People are happier, healthier, more productive when we work with them, rather than to them, for them, or not at all. Right? Right. So, so I'm gonna lay these out. The 1 has some language that is, so 2 we call it punitive, 4 we call it permissive, the with we call restorative, and the not says neglectful, but generally absent is a little more comfortable word, because neglect could be, you know, we're not talking about legal neglect, we're just talking about that bum, lazy, absent, but that it could show up as neglect. And we can look at this in the intrapersonal, like looking at ourselves, in our relationships with our partners or friends or children, And we can also look at this in a system. So if you, does anybody work or run a co-op, micro school? Okay, so in like a setting like that, yes, hi there, how are you? A setting like that, then working with the families that you work with, you can be restorative with them, and restorative is kind of a loaded word. But in a community, you can also engage in that way. So again, inside, like internally, you can be punitive with yourself, overly harsh, right? And there are people who do that. I've never been too harsh on myself. That is not one. I've treated myself to donuts, and I probably will on the way home today for a good job. Go Ken, right? So like maybe a little too caring, right? A little too much self-care. But so like thinking internally, how do you treat yourself? Are you overly permissive with yourself? Are you overly punitive? Or are you a bum with yourself, right? Like that is a possibility. And these are all, and when I say are you, it's by default. It's like, how do you just kind of show up, right? There's also, we can do things by design. We can go to the not box, that's what we call it, like we box this. We can go to the not box on purpose. End of a Friday, you've had enough. You're like, the house is like falling down, right? But you're like, you know what? Mommy's gonna go behind some closed door that you can't find me, or I'm gonna go sit in the car at the CVS, right? Because you know the kids aren't gonna find me there, right? I'm gonna go sit in the car for 10 minutes by myself, listen to my music, so that I can come back and be with the family, kids, spouse, whatever that is, right? So by design, go into that not space to come back to with, right? So the difference between by default and by design, right? So I'm going to give you a couple examples of my life and my RP buddy Erica. She helped whittle this down to 45 minutes, and she went through her understanding restorative practices when her kids were at 3 and 6, and I went through it when my kids were like 14 and 16, so a little different stage of life. This really hit me with my son. He was 17 in 2019, 2020. He was a junior in high school, and when he was supposed to start looking for colleges, and the whole world shut down. And I was on him like nobody's business to get his essay written, to go on this Zoom call, to make sure his blah, 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 that all this stuff was done. And all it did was split us apart, right? And eventually, it was one of the kids in my class, she was probably like 20 years younger than me. She's like, dude, because this happened to her, she's like, you're gonna push your son away. I'm like, oh crap, you're right, right? Because I was doing this, I wasn't here, right? So when I literally just made the decision to, and the image I have is walk next to, right? Walk along with. The other word I use is accompany, right? Like I just lived with him in his life, fundamentally changed our relationship. Like not anything I could describe in a picture or word or anything. And that's where I was like, this is good stuff. This is worth paying attention to for me, right? Early, so my wife was raised in a permissive home. Her laundry was always done for her, the food was always made, everything was done for her. And she parented our first like this. I grew up somewhere in here. Single mom, going to school, she was going to school. There was 3 of us, blah, blah, blah. She was somewhere either between not there and telling us what to do, right? So I grew up here. So when I saw parenting like that, I was like, what are you doing? And what I did was I went the opposite direction. She went to 4, I went to 2, thinking that it was some sort of balance, right? And the more she 4'd, the more I 2'd, right? I remember walking out of the mall with 2 kids under my arm at one day. Yeah, not my finest moment, right? But I was here trying to counteract this. This was my son, the first one. My second one was born really sick. My wife went here because she thought she was gonna die every day. She went to separate. She went to neglect. She was like, I'm out, like, I'm gonna try to keep her alive and hopefully it happens, right? But it wasn't a clear call. So I went here to do everything for her, for my wife and for my kid, right? So 20 years later, we're still living through this start, right? But we didn't know it for about 10 years. Once we did, now we can start working. Once we have a picture of where we are, now we can start making decisions, right? Like, I still fall here, but not nearly as much as I did, right? And my wife is more, she tends to be more to her because I tend to still be more for her, right? So, it's not like you're one way, it's all relational, so it's like, how does this show up for me? How does it show up at this time? I know for me, when I get stressed, this is where I go. I go to the punitive. I go to the demanding, right? This is my position of control. Erica, Schwambeck, did you have Miss Schwambeck?
No.
Did you guys have Miss Schwambeck? No. Miss Lee,
No.
you sure? Gym teacher at the middle school?
Oh, younger
Miss
blonde
Lee?
hair?
Yes, yeah. She goes here. Her way of controlling things is to make sure it's all done her way, in the 4-box. She does amazing work, and not many people can do it as well as her. So often what she does is just make sure it gets done, and does it herself. It's exhausting, right? So I want you to, like, I'm hoping people are like thinking about where they default in different situations. Like, where do you default? It doesn't mean where you have to be, right? So you think about how can you get more towards the width. Here's another one. She gave me this one. Her little guy, you know, I think he was 8 years old. And for a very long time, she had been tying his shoes for him. Then he gets up to the plate at baseball, and the ump's like, no, hold it up, son, you gotta tie your shoes. Mom's gotta run out to home plate to tie the kid's shoe, right? Like, she's still out there doing it for him because she couldn't get to the width on that one. She's not like that anymore. I mean, she's grown up, right? Kid's tying his own shoes, I think he's 11. Right, but, so like, yeah, thinking of this for, like, there's a lot of stuff we do for that is really also a position of control. This is a position of control, that is a position of control, right? Both of them, even though they look like opposites, right? So, is there anybody who's willing to admit they're like, generally like fall into the 4 category? Yeah, okay?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, yeah, so, so lots of care, nurture, support, great start, okay? To move to width, you don't decrease the love, care, and support. You add some accountability, right? It's not less love and care and support. You can be just as loving and caring and supporting, add the accountability,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is there anybody who's a default 2, which is funny, yeah, right, and you're married?
Married,
Yeah, yeah, right? So you're gonna have lots of conversations this afternoon.
We do constant, it's a battle sometimes.
And do you use this language?
Mm,
You will today.
You will
Yeah,
today.
you will today.
I guess. I mean, it makes more sense when you put it all together.
Correct, right, so you don't have to hold anyone less accountable, you just have to add the care, nurture, and support. Right, it's not less accountable, and it's not less caring, nurturing, and supporting. So what I came to like kind of get a little bit is that, so accountability is on one axis and support's on another, right? They're separate. We see them like this, that if we're more accountable, it's somehow less nurturing. If we're more nurturing, it has to somehow be less accountable, but they're separate. And we can keep them that way. And that if we're not both, I think that's it. If we're not that both most of the time, that's less respectful. You don't want to be permissive and enabling. Like, unless you want people dependent on you, which is a thing. Right? Yeah.
I had a question.
Sure.
So in my example, my son, I try to stay within the with category, but he's very stubborn and hard-headed. So I find that after repeating myself, I fall into the two category. How do you deal with that situation?
So we're going to talk about a couple things. And again, remember this is a 12-hour training. I'm trying to do it in 45 minutes, right? So, so I'm going to say relationally. That's like yeah, sure. So I'm going to talk about using feeling language, right? And especially if you lean punitive, feeling language is probably not your natural go-to, right? So.
Well, I try to be in the with, but I tend to fall back into the two.
So I'm going to encourage you at some point to find a feelings wheel that works for you. So these are known as feelings wheels. I pulled this one. It's not the one I normally use, but I grabbed it because it has the emojis on it too. And most people, kids, even little kids who don't read well, can pick the one that matches how they're feeling, right? You, if you're not used to using feeling language, can pick the one that matches how you're feeling, right? So, and there's kind of a little formula here we have, and it sort of feeds into this, the big picture of restorative practices, which for me says, acknowledge the past, where are we in the present, and where do we want to go in the future? Not stuck in the past, not ignoring the past. Acknowledge it, where are we feeling now, and where do we want to go? This idea of past, present, future, right? Where was it? Where are we now? Where are we going? So if you look at this, this is actually written backwards. When I see and hear, that's something that happened in the past. I feel something now, and what I need or would like is what I need in the future, okay? Now, this is not meant to be a tool for manipulation. It's really meant to make closer relationships. And that's really what you want to do is, the closer you make that relationship, the less likely, it's not guaranteed, less likely people are going to do things that you don't want them to do, right? Like throw their food across the house, or bonk their sibling in the head with a block, right? And so it was funny, we tried to play with this earlier. The other thing that Erica said, and somebody brought up in the earlier session, was you can certainly also turn these around. Like some kids might not take kindly to, I feel angry when, right? But you might say, mommy feels, or daddy feels much better when you put your plate in the sink, right? I really would like you to take your plate and put it in the sink, right? And that would like or need really talks about what the accountability piece is, right? That expectation. And the other piece, the I feel piece, really talks about sort of where that care, nurture, support is, that feeling side. So this encompasses kind of this whole idea. Everything we do really comes back to this idea of how can we be more with? Using feeling language is part of it. I'm going to encourage you, RJ, just because you brought it up, to try it with your wife first before you try it with your kids. Just as a practice, like literally, it's going to feel kind of wonky, but you just try it. You know, just like practice it, because if it's not your natural go-to. For some people, it's a natural go-to. Feelings.
I tell my husband all the time, he thinks I'm crazy, but I'm like, this is what I learned.
Yeah.
So you try it. Yeah. So you try it.
See, I try to have the conversations with my son, like, for example, yesterday we went bowling, but before we went bowling, my husband was pushing my son in the swing, and it was a plastic swing, so when he pushed him, he kind of like slipped out of that, and he got really mad at him, and was like, really just over
Which
the
way?
top of it, like, not him, he wasn't
Oh,
mad,
okay.
my son was
No,
mad
my
and
son
he
was
fell
mad,
out.
yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
like, it's your fault, it's not my fault, and
Yeah.
screaming at him, he's, I don't like you, get away from me,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
you
that's a
know,
good
had the whole
button
explicit
pusher.
thing, and I was like,
Yeah.
trying to calm him down, and I'm like, listen, like, Daddy didn't mean for this to happen, it was an accident, and I was like, remember when you hit your brother sometimes accidentally and you say sorry, you can't hold a grudge against him because it was a mistake.
Right.
And so like, I tried to break it down, simplifying from his own experiences that he's had to make him understand, but he still was like super ticked off probably
Yeah.
the rest of the night.
So here's the thing, right? Like, he was not in his thinking brain,
Yes.
right? Like,
Well,
I don't know
it's,
if anybody
like,
goes
was
neurosequential
not-
model, brain science, whatever, right? So he was in the bottom of his brain.
Yeah.
He was only angry, only
Yes.
sad. But he was probably more sad,
Yeah.
but only knew angry,
Yes.
right? So helping him work through that once his brain was like settled down a little bit so that he could actually think about it. And that's for me too. Like, if you're worked up, don't try to be restorative. Just go to the knot box, chill out, and then come back when your brain's working, right? Because your brain is not in a good spot. If you're like super fired up, you're just, I just dropped F-bombs, right? So, not a good spot. So just, think about, am I in a place to be doing this right now? Think about how you could use the feelings wheel. We have a feelings wheel in our center. It's not as prominent as it should be, and that's one of those pieces I'm gonna add after like just talking with some folks today. I need to be more explicit about doing this. The other thing is to be explicit about this with the kids. I don't know, Kim and I talk, but I never talk to Kim, right? I talk with Kim, right? I don't talk to Kim's son, I talk with Kim's son, right? I've taken that language out. I do some stuff for people, but not a lot. I try to come along with, right? And I try to get people to stop, to notice the language that they're using, because if you're using language of to, I'm gonna do this to somebody, I don't want stuff done to me. I'm happy to do things with you, right? So like, even changing that little piece of language starts to change the way you think about it. And again, I won't say it's not magic, but I've been at this for a while, right? So this isn't overnight. When I started teaching, this is all I knew. All I knew, too. And I did this really good. And when the kids hated it, I went even further. Like, I dragged the box. Higher accountability, lower care, like negative care and support. Like, picture that who's, I don't know if most of you are old enough. Breakfast Club?
Yeah.
Breakfast Club, well,
You guys know that. I think we're all kind of in that age bracket.
Yeah, I do.
alright, yeah, right? Like, so Breakfast Club, that teacher in Breakfast Club, that was me, right? It was not good. But I didn't know what else to do, so I only did the same thing more. Right? And the kids kept hating it more and more, and they kept getting worse, and I kept having to do it more, and it still didn't work. But all that is it's just self-work. It's focused. There's a trainer that I work with, she uses the line, the way to with starts within. And Erica and I, my RP buddy, who just texted me, she's like, we would do a lot of holding up the mirror for each other, right? So, not always pretty, right? But if you want to make changes, you kind of have to be there. That's why I said, is somebody willing to say if they're for? Because it's stuff you just have to look at. And you have to say it's not really, if you want to be here, no, certain things are going to happen. If you want to be here, no, certain things are going to happen. Make them choices to be here when they have to be. Kids running out in the middle of the street, be as loud and as mean as you want. Kid wakes up, has a fever, you're gonna do all that stuff for them. You would chew their food up for them. if that's what you had to do. And I used to say that to my middle schoolers. They would be like, dude, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, do this, do this. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm like, okay, I get it. You want me to do your work for you? Sure. Do you also want me to come down to the cafeteria and chew your food up for you? And spit it in your mouth? And massage it down? They're like, that's disgusting. I'm like, yes, it is. Chew your own food. Do your own work. Right? That was kind of, but, you know, in an exaggerated sense, but they got it at that point. So, if you're going to work with kids in this way, they should know it. Right? They should be familiar with what this is. If you want them to use it, you should say, I really want to have a closer relationship. I want us to be able to live together, wherever that, in a school community or educational setting or at home or wherever that is. They need to know, because otherwise you're just doing it to them. Right? It's a program that you're doing to them, but that's not what you want to do. Right? So be explicit, do it with them, make sure they're clear, make sure they're on board, and practice it. So again, with the way we're growing as a community in the center that I'm developing, it doesn't fit in quite yet because the community is not as established as I want it to be, but I'm going to still do it. This is one piece. So using language, feelings language, generically. And I feel blank when I see or hear this, or when this happens, when somebody does this. This is what I need, right? And so it goes back to, Daddy didn't mean to push you off the swing, but you were still hurt when you fell, right? So the impact still happened. Part of what he wanted probably is just validation that he got hurt, right? Yes, right? I see that you're hurt, right? Not by design, I was not intending it, but intent and impact are different things, right? And what we're talking about is impact, not intent, right? So we need to address that impact, even if the intent was not to be hurtful, and often it's not, right? And that could be sibling to sibling, it could be parent to parent, parent to child, right? In any one of those directions. One more piece before, no, I'm gonna get it in a second, right? So using feelings language as a tool to live in the with. Okay. Then there's feelings questions. There's a lot up here, you don't need all of this. Open-ended questions that help get to emotions. Allow individuals space to explore issues in a less threatening way. That says non-threatening, but anytime you start asking somebody questions, they're gonna get a little tight, right? So if you ask the questions in a certain way, it's gonna be a little looser, a little more comfortable. It addresses past, present, and future. And then again, fair process we're not even talking about, can be used to explore positive changes in behavior, but also can help when there's impact, right? So there's two more, I think I have two more slides. So this is picture worthy. So this is when somebody has challenging behavior. And it always starts with what happened. Just tell me what happened. I was doing this and this and this. Now, this is not an investigation for facts, right? It's not like at 1:36, this is what happened. And you're like, no, it was 1:37. It doesn't matter, right? We're headed somewhere, okay? So what happened? Yeah. Again, I'm gonna use hit the block. Your one kid hits the other kid in the head of the block. That happens, right? And think of the other kind of analogies that would be similar. What happened? I hit my brother in the head with a block. Right? Maybe it was actually a stick. Who cares? Right? Right? What were you thinking of at the time? I was thinking I want to hit him in the head with a block. Right? Like, depends on the age. Right? That might be what it was. Right? Notice those are both in the past. The next question starts to move towards the present. What have you thought about since? I thought I want to play blocks more. You know, like, I don't know. Again, some of these depends on the age group. But this can be used Some of the language might need to change if you're talking littles, but adults, plenty fine to use this up through adults, probably, you know, late elementary, but, you know, think of your children that you work with if the language works with them. Who's been affected? This is where we get into the good stuff. Who's been affected and how they've been affected, right? It's not what did you do wrong, it's who was affected and how was he affected. Okay? And then the last question is, what do you have to do to make this right? And that really then moves into the accountability piece and into the future. What do you have to do to make it right? Right? I have to go tell my brother that I'm not going to hit him in the head with a block anymore. Probably a good idea. Right? And do you think maybe you should stop using blocks for the next couple minutes? Maybe. Again, you're not going in with the solution because it's their issue to solve. And when we do, we go to the for box and we take that conflict from them, make it all pretty, and give it back. And then we wonder why they can't manage conflict. Or we yell at them to do something, and they're still, we are in control, they are not. And they don't have control of their own conflict. The language we use is that we steal their conflict. And if we do that over and over again, just like the kid who couldn't tie his shoes at the home plate, he'll never be able to manage conflict because we'll have always stolen it from him. Right? So we need to be able to help them work through, accompany them through the conflict. That's a with position. Right? This is one, and usually this is done separately. Let's say one kid does something to another. This would be done with one, and this would be done with the other. Right? Kid got hit in the head with a block. What'd you think when you realized what happened? I thought you just hit me in the head with a block, right? What impact has it had on you? Or how do you feel about that? Oh, I don't want him to hit me. It hurt my head still. What was the hardest thing? He sucker punched me, or whatever, you know. And then the last one is, what do you think needs to happen? Right? This is that past, present, future for the person who was harmed. What do you think needs to happen? I need to make sure, I need to know he's not going to hit me in the head with blocking. Okay, great. And I'm over time, so I'm going to zip through the last little bit. So sorry about that. I thought we had till break. It's 2:45. So these are for that opposite end. And then that might be it actually. Here's two resources for you. Neither of these are IRP. I did not create these, but I found them. There is no book about using restorative practices at home. Erica, my friend Erica, should write it, and she might. So there's one, here's another one. Two, I have two, there's a second QR code, here's the second QR code, okay? These very much match the kind of material that the IRP puts out, but this is specifically for, and I know I'm already 3 minutes over time. Yep, thank you. Yeah, right, Danica came back. And somebody's gonna pull the plug on the computer. So here's two resources. My name's Ken, I run the Current Education Center. If you want information from me or other resources to go to, the place to come is either to me, IRP, but you probably won't get somebody that's gonna talk to you like I would. But I don't sell anything. I just know how helpful it is for families, and that's why I wanted to share it today. Yay, done. You're welcome. Yay. Self-Driven Child, I'm pushing this book. It's not mine, it's a great book. It does fit into this same with category. And The Surprising Purpose of Anger. This was a great book. Surprising Purpose of Anger, just in case, anybody, that was me. And no, I was the angry person.
Oh, I was like,
No, didn't write that one. And the Parents' Tao. I don't know if anybody's into like Buddhist philosophy, but the Tao, but this is like parenting from that like holistic, yes. So like, and then, yeah, teach your kids. And I think that's it, bye. Yeah. Done.
Thank you, that was
Thumbs up. All right, there we go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I wanna talk more about
Yeah,
this.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I know where you are.
All right.
Yeah, and I'll see you Thursday.
Okay, bye.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, this, I don't know if it's get into it, so I don't know if it's at all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
This one, I don't know if you ever had it here. And this one's the most sort of mainstream.
Confused? Yes.
Yeah, that's probably.
That'll be for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like say, that's
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you too, thanks. Good luck. Take care, told you we wouldn't connect, but can. You too. Oh, great, thanks.
We used to use those, I did a restorative practices.
Take care, nice seeing you again. Thanks.
When I was a teacher in the city,
Yeah.
we did those questions. We did them though with the kids together.
You can. You
And
gotta
it-
be ready for it.
Yeah.
They gotta be ready for it.
I mean, we would use it even after like violence
Yes,
situations,
sure.
and it works.
It does work.
It really does.
Yeah.
It doesn't work with my, I think maybe I'll try it with them apart, but my younger guys, it's a little.
Yeah, plus you change their diapers. That changes everything.
No,
That's
no,
what
I mean
use.
my younger students.
Oh, your younger students. Oh, okay. I thought
Yeah,
you were-
but they're more,
Try them separate first.
I think separate.
And then bring them together if you
Yeah.
want, like, so if you wanna do them together, do them separate first.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was awesome, Ken.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And, I think we're gonna do the next meetup in Ambler.
Yeah.
People are liking that idea.
Yeah, let me know. I can get us whatever you need at Cantina.
Yeah.
If you wanna go there. I mean, there's other places.
No, let's do that.
Yeah.
Kelly was like, cause Kelly wanted to come yesterday
Oh.
and couldn't because of this, obviously. And she
Yeah.
was like, we can do Ambler, that'd be so great. And I know a few other people that wanna come. And I was like,
Yeah,
alright,
great.
let's do it.
Yeah, so you
And
let
then-
me know with plenty of time. There is like a little, I mean, it depends on how big you think we're gonna get. There is like a tiny private room that if we had enough people, they could like close off a door.
I don't know. I mean, we went from 3 to 6. So.
Now we're gonna go, right, is
I
it
mean,
just,
we're not gonna go
I
that
think it'll
far.
go past 12.
You did? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I like Ken's.
Oh, yeah.
Can I make a request for April 11th?
April 11th.
Not really, because I'm flying to Disney World on it.
So when you thinking? Because the following week is spring break and Easter.
We're doing every other month. So
Oh,
we do
every
May.
other, got it.
We do May.
Okay, I'll
Can we
put my-
look at your schedule in
Yeah, I'll
May?
put my request in.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
You wanna come?
just let me know. My wife's worked there since they opened up, so, and she, yeah.
I am so excited because I have to tell you, Sharon has heard this, I was getting like a little frustrated, feeling like we weren't getting traction, and then going in there today and people being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I missed that one, I can't wait, and I just talked to this person and they told me they're connected to you because you talked to them about blah, blah, blah. Now I'm finally like, oh, we're, like, it's taken whatever.
Well,
6
so you want it to be like this, like incremental,
Yeah.
but it's probably gonna be like this.
Which I'm used to, like
Yeah.
I've done this many times in other areas, but I think for some reason I thought with entrepreneurs they would be more like get up and go-ish.
Some of them are just really busy.
But I think I just didn't account for that. So
Yeah, and they're all trying
just
to
a little
start really
harder
hard
than
things.
I thought. So anyway.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
very
I
excited.
brought you up this morning. There were a bunch of people in like the meet and greet this
Someone
morning.
said that. Someone was
And
like,
they're like,
"Oh, I'm really excited."
is there an Ambler, blah, 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 and it's probably this room. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, they pulled it up. They were so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, we did that.
stopped following me, and I just. Okay. I'm putting all these lights. Why did we get one of these? Where'd the other ones go? Wait, Archie, you know where the other rolly things went?
Yeah. They're all over here. Yo, why is this still recording?
Wait, still?
Yeah, it is.
I was so bad with recording some things, and then I over-recorded other things.